Are you happy to be here tonight? Question was asked this morning, and I think was proven by the way that we did sing that song, I'm happy today. But I hope you're happy tonight as well. Hope you like the psalmist when he said, I was glad to me when they said, let us go into the house of the Lord. It is always a blessing that way. But it is a blessing and a privilege to be here, to be able to worship. And I hope you're thankful for that, and I hope that it makes you happy. I do appreciate, once again, those who were here tonight for our VBS meeting. We are a little behind on our plans once again, but I think everything will come together nicely, and with everyone's help, we always have a good VBS here. I thank you so much. We've been thinking about on Sunday nights for the past couple of weeks the idea of stewardship. And I'm sure you're well aware by now, if you didn't already know, what a steward was, and simply someone who takes care of something for someone else. And we've already looked at the idea that we should be stewards of our body and good stewards of the Word of God. And we'll have two more lessons about this. Tonight we want to think about the idea of being good stewards of our money. Now, I know if you were in the Bible class this morning, there's going to be some overlap. Not a whole lot, but there will be a little overlap here with what we talked about in the Bible class this morning concerning our money. But that's okay. We always need to be reminded that the things we have in this life are not our own, but that they are God's. The wise man says in Proverbs chapter 30, verses 8 and 9, remove falsehood and lies from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of God. And so the wise man in the book of Proverbs says that there is a happy medium there regarding the money and the possessions that we have that will allow a person to live their life in such a way as not place your trust in God, but at the same time wanting for things so bad that you steal and thus defile yourself. There's a happy medium there. And once we find that happy medium, we need to train ourselves and to learn to be content. As we read this morning from the Bible class, having therefore food and clothing, let us be content, Paul told young Timothy. You know, when we think about money, we do need to realize, number one, that everything in this world belongs to God. You know, David says in 1 Chronicles 29 and verse 14, he says, who am I and who are my people that we should be able to offer you willingly as this? For all things come from you, he says, and of your own we have given you. In other words, David says the sacrifices, God, that we are making to you, they came from you to begin with. They are yours. We're just being stewards of what you've given to us. We need to realize that even today, the things we own are not our own, that they are God's. In Psalm 50, verses 10 through 12, the psalmist says something very similar when he says, every beast of the forest is mine. He's apparently speaking for God. Every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds on the mountains. The wild beasts of the field are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world is mine and its fullness. Everything you see in this world belongs to God. We further need to realize, before we get into our discussion, that we will one day give an account for the way we use the blessings God has given to us, especially our money. Friends, how are you using your money on earth? I've been very surprised here at your generosity. I've seen so many times you pull through it, and you never cease to amaze me with the generosity you display here at the Lawnville Road Church of Christ. We live in a very good area, an area where many people retire very wealthy. There are lots of good jobs around in this part of the country. And because of that, and because we have the ability to gain that kind of wealth in this area, we need to be doubly aware that one day we'll give an account for how we use the money God has given to us. With those two ideas as our background, let's consider three things tonight about our money. The first of those is this. Number one, money can be a blessing or a curse. It can be one, but it can be the other. It can consume your life, or it can be a great tool for you to reach out to others and to show them not only your love for them, but the love of Christ. And isn't that what God would have us to do with our money? Certainly, as we mentioned this morning, we do have the obligation to care for our families, to provide for our own. But we equally have the responsibility to help those who are in need. A few weeks ago, we considered a passage from James where James gives a scenario where somebody looks at someone else, particularly in the church, and they see that there is a need there, and yet all the people were willing to do was say, well, I'm sorry you have a need. Go your way. And they had the ability and the opportunity to help someone, but they didn't do it. As a result, James says that person's faith is in vain. You see, when we don't use our money to bless others, when we don't use our money to help others, it becomes a curse for us rather than a blessing to us and to others. Money can be a good thing. In 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8, again, I've already mentioned it, but that's where Paul tells that if a person doesn't provide for his own, especially those of his own household, he's worse than an unbeliever and he's denied the faith. When you use money to do that, that's a good thing. God expects you to do that. It's good. Proverbs 19, verses 6 and 7, many entreat the favor of nobility, and every man is a friend to the one who gives gifts. Boy, isn't that true? You stumble into some money, an inheritance or something, and you're able to do some things that maybe you haven't done in the past, and everybody wants to be your friend. Sounds familiar to us, doesn't it? Well, it's nothing new. Verse 7 there in Proverbs 19 says, all the brothers of the poor hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He may pursue them with words, yet they abandon him. You see, money can be a good thing. And oftentimes it is. But it can also be dangerous. I meant to tell you as we began, you might want to just keep your finger or a bookmark over in Proverbs, because much of what we're going to deal with tonight comes from the book of Proverbs. I would suggest if you want to learn how to handle your money, read through the book of Proverbs. It has a lot of advice pertaining to it. Money can be dangerous. It can be a good thing, but it can be dangerous. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5, the wise man says in verses 10 through 12, he who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. So what profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? In other words, when you get more things in life, you spend them. They are dispensable. Whether it be food, you eat the food and it's gone, so you only have the memory of it. Whether it's money that you spend and like that it's gone and you only have the memory of it. Money, wealth can be dangerous. In Proverbs chapter 27 and verse 20, Proverbs 27 and verse 20, there the wise man has this to say about our money. Hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied. You see, there's always seemingly something that we want. There's always something more. We always desire more, and that is the kind of attitude, especially when it comes to our money, according to Paul, that draws us away into a snare and many hurtful and dangerous lusts. Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 28, the wise man there says, he who trusts in riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like foliage. You know, I have some marigolds that I planted this year, and you typically think of marigolds as a pretty easy flower to grow, right? I'm telling you, I've got about 30 marigolds that the foliage is just dying, and I don't know why. It's driving me crazy. The flowers are pretty, but the foliage is dying. Well, listen again to what the wise man says. He who trusts in riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like foliage. I like to see my flowers with pretty dark green foliage. And again, it's driving me crazy. Well, in a very real sense, the wise man says, when we trust in our riches, you're like that marigold whose foliage is dying. It's not as pretty as it could or should be. Money can be dangerous. Friends, there are many things that are much more valuable in this life than money. In the book of Proverbs, he mentions at least 4 things that are much more valuable in life than money. For instance, in chapter 16 and verse 16, he says, how much better to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver. You see, to have wisdom, to gain understanding in life, is far more valuable than gold and silver. In Proverbs 22 and verse 1, he says, a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver or gold. What's in a name? What does your legacy say about you? What kind of legacy are you leaving? What's going to be the epitaph on your tombstone? How are you living your life? You see, the wise man says it's better to have a good name and better to have loving favor than silver and gold. In Proverbs 11 and verse 4, he says, riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. And so there are 3 things at least that he says are better than silver and gold. Wisdom, a good name, righteousness. What about the 4th one? It's found in Proverbs chapter 23, verses 4 and 5, where he says this, do not overwork to be rich. You know anybody that's overworking themselves to become rich? All around us it's happening. Do not overwork to be rich, because of your own understanding cease. Will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away like eagles toward heaven. They're here and then they're gone. I know a lot of people in life who seems like the day they get their paycheck, poof, it's gone. In it comes and out it goes. And that's why you can't trust it. There are things, friends, more valuable in life than money. And so money can be a blessing or it can be a curse. Number 2 tonight, let's think about a couple of ideas regarding stewardship in our money. Number 2, a good steward always acquires money honestly. A good steward always acquires money honestly. A man needs to provide an honest day's work for every day's pay. I know some people in life who don't put in an honest day's work, and they get much more money for that little bit of work they do than they deserve. But you see, a good steward puts in his hard and honest day's work for his every day's pay. Proverbs 10 and verse 4 says, he who has a slack hand rather becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Those who aren't willing to provide and put forth an honest day's work for their pay, they ultimately will become poor. There's no way they could ever receive wealth and riches, and especially favorably in the sight of God. Proverbs 28 and verse 19. He who tills his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows frivolity will have poverty enough. Hard work is of value. Hard work is a blessing. And God, since the beginning of time, has expected man to work hard to earn his wages. In 2 Thessalonians 3 and verse 10, there Paul says, even when we were with you, we commanded you this, if anyone will not work, neither shall he eat. And yet how many people in this world do you know who don't work, and they have maybe more than you do? I'm not saying there's not a time and a place for people who cannot work to be cared for. Sure, there's a time and a place for that, but people abuse it, don't they? It's a sad thing. And so a man needs to provide an honest day work for his pay. But secondly, a person never should compromise integrity to gain finances. Don't negotiate. Don't compromise your integrity just to get more money. In Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 10, the wise man speaks of diverse weights, diverse measures. They're both alike. They're an abomination to the Lord. And in that day and time, there were people who would tinker with the scales to make it in their own favor so they could get richer, so they could have more money. And the wise man says it's an abomination to God. And there are people today who, although we might not tinker with the scales like that, people sometimes do things to make a deal in their favor, and it's still an abomination to God. Proverbs 21 and verse 6, getting treasures by a lying tongue is the fleeting fantasy of those who seek death. Do you know anybody in life who has lied to gain financial advantage? No, surely not. That doesn't happen in our world, does it? Yea, do you know somebody in the church who has lied to gain financial advantage? That's even more sad, isn't it? And yet sometimes that happens. Well, the wise man says that that's a fantasy of those who are seeking death. That's the end. That's the end result. Death will be what happens to them. Finally, Proverbs 20 and verse 17, bread gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but afterward his mouth will be filled with gravel. That's interesting, isn't it? You see, when somebody gains financial advantage, or in this case, they gain food because they have been deceitful, it tastes the same, the money spends the same, but ultimately, the end result is terrible, isn't it? The man who fills his mouth with bread by deceit ultimately has gravel in his mouth. You ever had rocks in your mouth? I don't know why, but I put rocks in my mouth one time as a kid. I'm not lying to you. That's stupid, isn't it? I didn't do it again. Not purposely. I understand the picture he's given here. What would that do to a person? You sit there and you chew on some rocks. Well, certainly it's not healthy. And yet that's the description the wise man gives of a person who gains advantage by deceit. So a good steward always acquires money honestly. Number 3, and finally, let's think about this area of stewardship. We need to be careful as good stewards. Good stewards are careful how they spend their money. Good stewards are careful how they spend their money. First of all, he gives generously. A good steward gives generously. Proverbs 11 and verse 25 says, the generous soul will be made rich, and he who waters will also be watered himself. A generous giver with your money? Or are you greedy? Are you stingy? I'm not making an accusation. I'm simply asking a question. Are you generous with the money that you do have, no matter how much it is or how little? Because to be generous, the wise man says, is to be rich. You see, what you do when you're generous with your money is you bless the lives of other people. I think about times, for instance, we were at the hospital. I remember when Sydney was having surgery on her back. And there were several of us gathered around there, mostly their family. And there was a man who stumbled into the hospital wanting money for a bus ticket to get home. And he gave us this story about why he needed it. And so I genuinely didn't have any money with me to give him, or I probably would have given him $1 or $2. But he gathered the money that he said he needed, and he walks out the door. And our discussion went something like this. I wonder if he's telling the truth. I wonder if he's lying to us. So I come up with this plan. I was going to follow him, see where he went. And I walked out the door behind him, and I saw him go down the hallway and give somebody else the very same story. I believe the amount of money he asked for was $13, not a large amount of money. I know full well he got more than that. Yet he goes out the door and tells the story to someone else. And I hollered down the hallway, I said, don't do it. I said, he just got that much or more. And boy, he sure was angry with me. I may or may not should have done that, but that's what I did. But you know, I look back on that and I think, isn't it better to err on the side of generosity than greed? I don't know that God would hold you accountable for that as a misuse of your money. You can't investigate. I'm not suggesting that you just hand money out to everybody that asks it of you. But what would God think if you just were greedy with your money? You were never willing to help anybody. Think about it. A good steward is generous with his money. A good steward is also discerning about what he purchases. What do you purchase in life? What do you use your money for? Do you only use your money for those things which are temporary pleasures? When's the last time you bought a good book religiously? A book that would help you draw closer to God? Have you ever bought a book that would help you draw closer to God? A good steward discerns about what he purchases. He is discerning about what he purchases. A good steward always pays his debts promptly. Now, the ideal situation would be for us not to have any debt, wouldn't it? And there's a revolution sweeping the country now where people are really trying hard to get out of debt. But the reality is we have debt. If you don't have any credit card debt, I'm very happy for you. Chances are, unless you've reached the age where you've paid your home off, most of us probably have at least a mortgage. The Proverbs writer says, the borrower is the slave of the lender. And debt is generally not a good thing. But when you have debts, friend, the good steward always pays his debts promptly. Proverbs 3, verses 27 and 28 says, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in the power of your hand to do so. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come back, and tomorrow I will give it, when you have it with you. Borrowed something from his neighbor. And the neighbor comes and wants what is due to him, and you say, no, you come back tomorrow and I'll give it to you, when you had it with you all along. He says, don't do that. Pay your debts promptly. And of interest, there's a lot of information in the Proverbs about debt. A good steward of money always anticipates future expenses. Proverbs 6 and verse 8 says, and I believe this is where he's giving the picture of the ant versus the sluggard. And speaking of the ant, it says that she provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest, making preparations for the future, expecting things to happen and things to come in the future. For the ant, there is coming a time in the seasons where they will not be able to gather harvest, to store things up. It's kind of like squirrels, isn't it? Don't squirrels do that? They gather things all spring and all summer and all fall for the winter. What about us? In Genesis 41, verses 47 through 49, there you might be familiar with the story where there's a famine in the land of Egypt. And Joseph is there serving under Potiphar and for the Pharaoh of Egypt. And there's a famine in Egypt, and so Joseph goes out and he gathers plenty of food and stores it up for the future so these people wouldn't starve to death. That's what a good steward will do. Doesn't consume it all on his lusts. Finally, a good steward tries to leave an endowment for the next generation. Do you realize that's part of being a good steward? And generally, that's the way things happen in life. Generation leaves things for the next generation, and it just continues down many times. In Proverbs 13 and verse 22, the wise man says this, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. Part of being a good steward, friends, is leaving an endowment for the next generation to help them care for themselves. Proverbs 20 and verse 21 says, an inheritance gained hastily at the beginning will not be blessed at the end. And sometimes people are quick to get that inheritance and spend it on things that they don't even need. And certainly that's not the intention of the writer. Friends, let me ask once again, are you being a good steward of your money? I hope you're being a good steward of God's Word. I hope you're being a good steward of the body God has given you, but I really do hope you're being a good steward of your money. Friends, the key to happiness is not in money. Paul says in Philippians 4 and verse 11, I've taught you in the ways of wisdom. I've led you in the right paths. And in that context there, Paul makes kind of hints at the idea that is what brings true pleasure, true happiness, contentment in life. It's not money, righteousness, being content with what you have. Hebrews 13:5 and 6 mentions that as well. Beware of covetousness. How are you living your life? How are you spending your money? Friends, as we plan for budgets and so forth in the coming months and the coming years, just remember that it belongs to God. Be mindful of how you're using it. You might be thinking tonight, maybe you've not been a good steward of that which God has blessed you with. Remember, when you're not being a good steward of your money, God is not pleased. And most of the time, when that is the case, it's an abomination to Him. Maybe you realize that is you tonight. You can repent of that wrong and change it. Be a good steward of your money from this point forward. Maybe you're not a Christian tonight. Maybe you want to be a good steward, but you don't know where to start. Well, it starts with becoming a Christian. Then, after that, you can be a good steward. If you need assistance with that tonight, we'd love to help you. You need anything at all, you're subject to the invitation tonight. Come while we stand and sing.
On behalf of the Lawnville Road Church of Christ, I want to thank you for joining us today for our worship. If you ever have an opportunity, we invite you to join us at our physical location at 1301 Lawnville Road in Kingston, Tennessee. We hope you will come and experience. On behalf of the Lawnville Road Church of Christ, I want to thank you for joining us today for our worship. If you ever have an opportunity, we invite you to join us at our physical location at 1301 Lawnville Road in Kingston, Tennessee. We hope you will come and experience the simplicity of New Testament Christianity, to learn about God, and to become a part of His family. If you have questions, if you would like to know more about the Bible, or if you would like a home Bible study, feel free to contact us by calling 865-717-0444. Or for more information, please visit our website at www.lawnvilleroadcoc.org. Again, we thank you, and we hope you have a blessed day.